Welcome to the Max Inventory Control and Physical Inventory Training Session. I'm your Exact Americas trainer, Vince Stefanetti. In this session, we're going to show you how easy it is to start implementing Max Inventory Control and how to perform a physical inventory using the Max software. Now we're going to go over all the basics and as well get into more detail as we move along. Don't be worried if you know little or nothing about the module. We're going to start at the beginning and explain everything. It is important to know that you have a complete set of documentation in PDF format installed with your Mac system. You also have an online portal that contains a knowledge base and many other resources. Max users can gain access to the portal by navigating to https://customers.exact.com. If you do not yet have access to the portal, be sure to contact your customer advocate so that you can get a username and password. The Inventory Control module enables you to track and maintain the available inventory balances for all parts. This includes finished goods, raw materials, and as well non-inventory parts that you want to track and cost. Inventory control is a system of checks and balances that keeps constant track of all on-hand parts and materials. Since inventory represents a substantial investment, it is essential that accurate information concerning it be made available to organization personnel. This includes where parts are located, how many there are, how often they need to be counted, and whether a part has become obsolete or not. The Max Inventory Control module provides immediate benefits by providing needed functionality. This includes improved control of inventory in multiple stock locations, pick lists for parts using effective start dates, the ability to locate parts in multiple stock rooms and in specific locations within a stock room, accurate date and time-stamped inventory transactions by part or by order number, detailing each issue, receipt, adjustment, transfer, cycle count, and shipment. This also includes the ability to track which user did the transaction as well. Okay, let's take a look at what you're going to learn today in this session. You're going to learn how to set preferences in inventory control, how to set up inventory control, how to do transactions, how to use the reports and displays, and how to do a physical inventory in Max. Okay, let's start by logging into Max and going to the Inventory Control module. Double-click the icon on your desktop. Then type in your username and password. The default for Max is Manager, all capitals, and Password, all capitals. Once you've logged in, navigate to the Materials tab, then click Inventory Control. Click Activity from the menu, then select Transactions. You've now navigated to the main screen in Inventory Control. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at Preferences in Inventory Control. Click Options from the menu, then select Preferences. Okay. Now the Inventory Control module includes optional preferences to display or not display cost, due quantities, on-hand quantities, and to set the number of decimal places for values on the Inventory Control transaction screen. You access the preferences as you did here by clicking Options and then clicking Preferences. Now the module can be set to display due quantities for receipt, issue, and non-inventory transactions. Due quantities do not display by default, so if you want these to be displayed, you'll need to check the boxes here. Now when displayed due quantities is marked, the Balance Due field displays on selected transaction tabs. Also, the values displayed in the Transactions Grid Quantities column after a query has been made match the value displayed in the Balance Due field for each order. When displayed due quantities is not marked, the Balance Due field does not display on the Selected Transaction tab, and 0 displays in the Transaction Grid Quantities column for all line items after a query. To display on-hand quantities in the Cycle Count tab, mark the checkbox to display on-hand quantities in the cycle count box. You can also display cost. The cost per unit field displays in all transaction tabs except for the transfer tab. Also, unit cost and extended cost columns display on the transaction grid. MAX calculates and displays transaction quantities using the number of decimal places specified in the number of decimal places checkbox. Okay, let's look at the results of configuring these settings. So we'll go ahead and check display cost and display due quantity. Display on hand is already checked for the cycle count, and we have it set to 2 decimal places. After those settings are made, close the transactions window, open it back up. Let's click on cycle count. And as you can see here, we now have the unit cost columns. Let's do a range of parts. Click query. And we don't have unit cost for these particular parts yet, but it will display these columns, and we display the quantity here. If we go to receipt, you can see that now we have a balance due field here. On issues, the same thing. Okay, let's create stock locations. Go to Activity, Inventory Data, Stock ID Data. Now, to create a simple stock ID in MAX, you can enter up to 8 characters in the stock ID field. Double-clicking the stock ID field will display all stockrooms that exist in the system already. Stockrooms can only be deleted if certain criteria are met, one of which is that there could be no inventory in that location. A stock ID must be designated as nettable if you want the stock contained in it to be recognized by MRP. Non-nettable locations would be set up for stock that you want to use for, say, QA hold or R&D parts. This inventory will not be recognized by MRP. GL account numbers are set up for stock IDs using the Financial Integration module. We covered this in the training session on costing. MAX provides a special feature to split the stock ID field into stockroom and locator. The stock ID field can be separated into these sections. In other words, you can use the 8 characters that are available for a stockroom identifier to define the stock location and a specific location within the stockroom. This is useful when you'd like to, say, specify a row and bin within a stockroom. Okay, let's see how this is done. Okay, we'll need to go to System Manager, close this window, go to System Manager, click Activity, System Configuration. Click on MAX Switches, and you'll see here stockroom length. Currently it's set to 3. What this means is that the first 3 characters of the stock ID field designate the stockroom. The remaining characters can be used as a locator, which means row and bin or a specific area within that stockroom. Okay, let's go back over to inventory control. The next thing we're going to look at is inventory part data. Now, we covered this tab in bills of materials, but we're going to review a couple things here to make sure we cover the importances in relation to inventory control specifically. Now, there are 3 things of vital importance in inventory control in inventory part data. That is the primary stock ID, inspection required, and assigning your cycle count information. Now, each MAX part ID should be assigned a primary stock ID. The reason for this is that in different areas within this module and others, the primary stock ID is used as a default and is provided as an option in inquiries and printouts. Inspection required. Checking the box allows users that process inventory receipts to see if the part requires inspection. It is a read-only field on the receiving dialog screens. Now, assigning cycle count information. Your part ID should be added to an inventory cycle count program. You can utilize the fields here to specify all the different characteristics of a cycle count program, the frequency of the counts, your out of tolerances, and so on. Please take time to review your cycle count policy and make sure you enter one in. Okay, let's look at our next item on the menu. So we'll go ahead and close this window, close transactions, go to activity, inventory data, part stock data. Okay, so let's go ahead and enter in a part here. Alright. Now as you can see here, we have the reorder point and the reorder quantity that was entered in for this part in inventory part data. Now the reorder point and the reorder quantities that you see here are in relation to the stock ID with this part. So there's reports in inventory control that allow you to utilize this. The part stock information is actually displayed on the distribution reorder point report, and that's generated by marking part stock ROP when you run that report. That way it actually looks at the part stock information that's entered in here to run the report. Now the green highlight, that means that that's the primary location for this part, and the shared checkbox over here, that means that there's more than just this part in that location. Okay, now just to iterate one more time about the reorder point, you have the ability to set reorder point and reorder quantities per part stock location, but you also have the ability to specify it on an individual part. Now the reports in inventory control allow you to run reports based on either one of those. So you can specify both, you can specify one, you can select which you like. Okay, let's go back over to the transactions window. So I'll close this, go to activity, transactions. Okay, let's discuss a little bit how you actually perform inventory transactions prior to implementing purchasing and master scheduling or shop orders. Now, a successful implementation first depends on accurate bills of materials. After this is accomplished, accurate inventory balances is the next step. Now, you can begin tracking inventory before you've implemented other modules that affect inventory, such as purchasing control. This is accomplished by using unplanned issues and receipts, doing stock adjustments, and running reorder point reports. Now, as for unplanned issues, if a stockroom is being controlled, no stock will be allowed out of it until an unplanned issue has been entered into the system to account for it. Likewise, a controlled stockroom also means nothing will be accepted into inventory without a receipt transaction being entered into the system. Now, each one of these transactions, the issues, the receipts, and the adjustments to stock, all have tabs in the transaction screen. Let's have a look at them. Okay, now here we are in the transaction screen. As you can see, we have the three panes. We have the transactions tabs here. We have the part stock information over here in the upper right, and then we have the grid down at the bottom. Now, we're mainly concerned here now with looking at the unplanned issues and receipts. So as you can see here on the receipt tab, our first one is unplanned. If you use this drop down, you'll have the other transactions for receipts. We're just concerned with unplanned, so let's take a look at that one. It's pretty straightforward. All you need to do is enter in your part ID here, enter in the stock location and the quantity, and you can transact this transaction. Likewise for issues, unplanned is the default, but it also includes other kinds of issues too for shop and subcontract. In an unplanned mode that we're describing right here, of course you would select unplanned, enter in your part information, and then once you have that in there, you can click process and complete the transaction. You have a logs button here. This allows you to look at the issue logs and any kind of error log as well. We'll cover this a little bit further later. Alright, so for our transaction here, we did 10 of this part right here. We can do one other one. Let's issue a keyboard, and we'll issue 10. Process that. And as you can see here in our part stock, our primary location is MSI. I don't know if you saw that there, but it did reduce after we did the transaction. We can do another 10. Unplanned issue, process that. And once we complete that transaction, it updates the part stock grid over here. For receipt, say we're going to do an unplanned receipt of our part 1300 and put 100 more in stock. Enter in the quantity and process. And this is under inspection. It's giving us that warning. And it'll go ahead and complete the transaction and put it into MSI. Now our adjustments tab, what the adjustment does is it increases or decreases the quantity on hand for a particular part. This is different from a cycle count because a cycle count will just put in the value that you enter in. An adjustment is going to increment up or down depending on what you enter in. So if we're adjusting stock, let's say we're adjusting our keyboard here, we can enter in a quantity, put in the stock location, and process that. And it changes the quantity here in our primary location. Now you can enter in multiple parts to adjust up or down. We'll do a full selection here from A to Z. Run our query, and then you can enter in your quantities here. This allows you to do multiple adjustments at one time. Alright, if we select all those and click process, it'll adjust everything up. Okay, let's look at our reorder point reports, namely the reorder point report and the distribution reorder reports. From your reports menu, select reorder point. Okay, and you have a sort sequence here and a range. You could specify that. The options here are all reorder point, exclude parts with the reorder point of 0, and part stock reorder point. Now the reorder point report lists parts that require reordering. This report is provided as an interim step for those users who have not implemented MRP yet. In most cases, the logic of MRP is going to create an improved inventory planning compared to reorder point. Now the distribution reorder report is run by marking the part stock ROP box, this one. Now it provides a view of all parts with total on hand plus on order inventory that falls below the reorder quantity set up in the inventory part data screen, as well as a comparison of on hand plus on order inventory and associated reorder points that have been established for each part stock location. Now these reports provide information for all part type codes except for F and P phantom and resource parts. So you make your selection here and you can go ahead and run the report. Selecting all reorder point button gives all part stock information for parts under reorder point. Okay, well let's look at the reports. First we'll look at the all reorder point, but as you can see, if you click this radio button, it provides you with this crystal report. Clicking this one gives you a different one. Alright, so let's run the first one. We'll do it for all parts. Okay, and as you can see here, it's giving us our part ID and description, commodity code, total balance due, the safety stock, reorder point quantities, and as well any action that's required here. We don't require any action at the moment, so they're not displayed there. So that's the inventory reorder point report sorted by part ID. We'll close that one. We'll run our next one, which is the part stock ROP. Now this is getting data from the part stock records in part stock data from the activity menu. Okay, and here's our report. As you can see, the format is a little different for this one. We have our part ID. We have what's due on purchase orders. Some other pertinent information here. Our on-hand quantity, our reorder point, and reorder quantity. It's also giving us suggestions here based on what the reported reorder points are so that we can take some action and correct any below reorder point situations. Okay, to wrap up this section of running things in an unplanned mode, that's prior to MRP or implementation of purchasing, shop floor control, or master scheduling, you basically use four things: unplanned receipts, unplanned issues, adjustments to stock, and by specifying reorder point and reorder quantities in inventory part data and in part stock data, you use the reports under reorder point, all reorder point, or part stock reorder point, and then you can actually go through and see what's on order, what you have on hand, and what you need to reorder based on those quantities. Okay, now let's take a look at how to control and validate inventory in MAX. The Inventory Control module provides many functions and reports to simplify the task of maintaining and verifying inventory accuracy. Inventory accuracy can be maintained through regular cycle counting and transaction discipline. We'll start with cycle counting. Cycle counting can be defined as a selective process that counts groups of parts on a periodic basis to maintain inventory accuracy. Categories of parts are defined by class code, and the class codes normally reflect a hierarchy of part cost. For example, class code A would be the most expensive, whereas class code C would be the least expensive. MAX tracks all cycle counts that are performed and their accuracy level and prompts for cycle counts that need to be done. Cycle count prompts are based on part information entered by you. Let's go back over to inventory part data. Okay, now first of all, you need to decide how often you want each part cycle counted. So you select from the drop-down: daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannually, or annually. You specify the class code for the part. You can also enter in a cycle count tolerance level by percentage or dollars. Any cycle count that exceeds the tolerance levels will cause a warning message to be displayed at the time the cycle count is actually entered. The count is also recorded as being out of tolerance at that time. If you want no warning messages, then enter in 100%. If you leave the fields blank, the system assumes zero tolerance and gives a warning on all transactions. Now, once you've entered in your policy, you can go ahead and transact your cycle counts. That's done from the Cycle Count tab. You can do them individually in the tab, or you could specify cycle count quantities in the grid. You can select multiple parts and have them all appear here. Enter in the quantities for each. Select those rows in the grid and process them. Now the cycle count worksheet will print the parts needing to be counted according to parts count frequency and the date it was last counted. So navigate to the Reports menu and select Cycle Count Reports. The cycle count worksheet will print the parts needing to be counted according to the parts count frequency and the date it was last counted. If you want to see only those parts which have not been counted within the planned cycle time based on the cycle count frequency code, mark the exception box. Click the Report button when you are ready to start the report. The cycle count worksheet provides lines on which to write your counts and the counter's initials. Okay, let's look at the worksheet. We're going to select all parts. We'll click the radio button for worksheet. Now you can select exceptions only here. You could have it print barcodes, which we'll do. It'll show the current on-hand quantity for the part. We'll select that. It'll print lot and serial numbers, and it'll print the locator references. We're going to select all of those. We'll go ahead and run the report. Here's our worksheet. As you can see, it generated the barcodes. It gives us a line for each part and its stock location. Some different information here, the last cycle count date, the unit of measure, its ABC class code, the current on-hand quantity, the physical count, who it was counted by, the verified count, and whoever verified it. Okay, let's move on to our next transaction, and that's the transfer transaction. Now, if you have more than one stock ID, there may be occasions when there is a need to transfer parts from one stockroom to another. This screen facilitates that transfer without making separate issue and receipt transactions. It combines an unplanned issue from one stockroom and an unplanned receipt to another stockroom all in one transaction. So to perform a transfer, enter in your part ID, enter in the from location and the to location. You could also do this in the grid as well. Okay, our next transaction is the receipt transaction. Okay, now we're going to change the receipt transaction type from unplanned to purchase. Now there are other types of receipt transactions that can be done, and these are going to be covered later, but we're going to look at a purchase order receipt for right now. You will notice the inspection required flag will be checked if the part requires inspection upon receipt. That's right here. A receipt quantity may be negative for a purchase receipt. This implies, okay, let's do a transaction. So we'll double click on order number to select a purchase order. We have an open one here. We'll select that, and we'll receive a quantity of 1 on this. So we enter in the quantity, we click process. Now keep in mind you can also use the grid, so you can start and end with a particular order number and have them fill the grid. And you can enter your quantity here that you're going to receive. Okay, let's complete our transaction up here. We'll click process. The part is under inspection, so we get the warning. We'll click OK, it'll let us continue. Okay, now that we've completed that transaction, we may want to print a purchase order receiver from this button right here. To do that, just simply click the button and it will activate the report that prints the receiver. Now a little more on the receivers. Now you can automatically generate a printed receiver for each purchase receipt. Now the receivers are formatted to print on standard purchase order forms, but you may choose to print it on plain paper too. You may also choose to print the receiver without a date, cost, or reference. Those configuration settings are in the System Manager under System Configuration. There's also an option to print a consolidated receiver. Now consolidated receivers are printed only after receipt session is completed, which means you have to exit the screen. Now if you wish to do that, then all you need to do is select the option Auto Print Receiver for PO, that's in the System Configuration and System Manager, and then it will print the consolidated receivers for you. Okay, well that example was for an inventory PO. But what about non-inventory purchases? Well, click on the tab here, Non-Inventory. Now non-inventory parts can be received against purchase orders. When receiving non-inventory purchases, a valid GL reference may be required. That all depends on whether the setup in financial integration for the overrides is set to yes for non-inventory. If it's not, it may not be required here. If it is set to yes, which is a very good idea to account for all the transactions for non-inventory items, then you'll have to specify it here. And this is browsable as well, you can see by the yellow highlight. Okay, let's do a non-inventory receipt. And we'll double click on the order number. Select a non-inventory PO that we have in the system. Enter in the quantity received. Click Process. And we do need to enter one. So we'll go ahead and enter in a valid GL reference for this transaction. It's for paper, so we're going to put in office expenses here. Okay, and click Process. Alright, likewise, if you want to, you can print a receiver. Now, there are a couple of additional resources to review receipts. From the Reports menu, you can run the receiving transaction log, or you can run receivers from the Reports menu as well. I wanted to mention those to you so you know that you have some additional resources and you're not just restricted to the receiver here. Okay, well, the last transactions that we're going to cover here have to do with shop floor control. Now, if you're using master scheduled orders or shop orders to control your manufacturing process, supplies will need to be issued to shop order and finished goods must be received into the correct stock room from the correct shop order. Now, depending on the complexity of your environment, you may need to search for parts. That could be done by clicking on Inquiry, Inventory by Stock ID. This allows you to search for parts either by part number or stock ID to find out where they're located. If we go by part ID, we can search for an individual part, click Query. It'll show us where it is, and it'll also show the highlight in green indicating that that's the primary location for the part. The other facility that you have here is what's called a BOM pick list. Now, the bill of material pick list is quite similar to the pick list that comes out in shop floor control, but you can select an individual part. You could specify a number of different things for the report: description 2, the quantity on hand, only printing the primary stock location, lot and serial or reference designators. And you can select the quantity. We'll put in 100 here and run our report. Now, this is going to produce a pick list for us for the quantity that we've entered. Let's look at our processing for shop orders now. So the basic sequence that you would go through in processing a shop order would be first to create the shop order, and then the next thing you would have to do is go out and pick your components. Okay, now we've gone through, we've printed our pick list, and we've got all our components. Next thing is to do the issue. So we'll click on the Issue tab. We've selected shop here. Now you can do individual component issues here in the tab, but if you want to do all of them at once, you have to use the grid. Okay, so we'll select our shop order. And we'll click the query button. Now when you do that, it'll show all the components that need to be issued to this shop order and the quantity that was entered in for the order to begin with. You can change this, say you're only doing half the order, enter in the quantity, and hit the query button, and it'll show you the quantity here. Okay, let's look at some other details in the grid. So you have deduct scrap. If this is checked, then the planned scrap for the components will be deducted from the quantity that's issued. If you check show byproducts, then any of the byproducts of producing the part will be displayed. Now byproducts are set up in the bills of materials with a negative quantity per. If you only want to show components that have open requirements, check this box. Since all of these are open, they're all showing. But if we had issued in full some of these and we had this checked, it would only show the ones that have a due quantity. Now another thing to note here is that if you increase the quantity here above the quantity that's due, we'll put in 1500 for instance, run the query, you'll get an indication here in yellow that it's greater than the actual due quantity for this particular component. We'll change that back. Run the query again. Now we'll select all on the grid here and click process. Alright, now it's giving us an indication here that there were errors. You can see that they're highlighted in red. So if there's any issue with a particular component, we already knew that our on hand was 0 for these parts, but we selected all of them anyways. But it's telling us here by marking them in red or highlighting them in red that these have some kind of issue that needs to be resolved. Now this could be as simple as you didn't select the proper stock ID, or the primary location was not where the parts were at the time. So you can make your changes in the grid, select the quantity again, do the query, and process your transaction to complete your issues. Now the system keeps a log of these transactions. We had a couple errors in our example here, so we're going to try to find out what happened. We'll click on Logs. The first one is the issue log. This is going to show us what actually got issued to the order. Gives the order number, the component, the description, stock ID, and quantity. The next one is the error log. And as you can see here, as I stated earlier, there was an invalid stock room. Now the last thing that we're going to look at here in the transactions is the backflush. Now this function is useful in a repetitive environment. What it does is it eliminates the need to issue components to an order. Instead, the system will receive the finished part into stock and automatically issue the components for the shop order from the primary stock rooms at the time of receipt. Now you can enter in an alternate stock room instead, and all components will be issued from the alternate stock instead of the primary stock location. Make sure that you check the logs after you do this to see if there was... Alright, our next section here is on the physical inventory process. Now the MAX Physical Inventory module helps MAX customers conduct an accurate, coordinated physical inventory program. The Windows, reports, and related programs offer a method of printing numbered physical inventory tags, collecting details of the physical inventory counts, and updating the inventory data in MAX. The basic concept is to manually count the entire manufacturing inventory in order to update cost data and on-hand stock information. Okay, well the diagram that you see in front of you here is a diagram of the overall process steps that are required to perform the physical inventory in MAX. The primary thing is you need to set a cutoff date to complete all of your transactions. The next thing is you got to set what kind of count mode you're going to use, either lot or total. You need to freeze your inventory. That means to stop inventory transactions until the physical inventory has been counted. You need to create the tag files. You need to print the inventory tags. You need to count the inventory. You can then release the inventory, except you can't do cycle counts. You need to enter the tag data, and then you need to verify a completed inventory count. You can use a number of the reports in physical inventory to do this. Once that's all done, then you can update the inventory data files using the batch, update, and purge. After that, you'll need to manually adjust shop orders and lot and serial records. Okay, let's log into the physical inventory module and try it out. Okay, let's log into the physical inventory module. So from the System Manager, click on the Materials tab, and then click on Physical Inventory. Now our first action was to set the cutoff date internally in the organization to determine when we're going to stop all our transactions and complete all our orders. The next thing you'll need to do is you'll need to go into System Manager, go into System Configuration, and if you have lot tracking, click on lot tracking, and then you need to specify whether you're going to use physical lot or total. What this switch determines is whether you're going to count each lot and serial number within a location or only count the total number of a particular part in that location. We're currently set to count the individual lots and serial numbers. Okay, let's go back over to physical inventory. Okay, with that switch set and our cutoff date all lined up, the next thing we would do after those things are complete would be to create the tag files. Select Batch. Okay, well, creating tag files generates a frozen image of all inventory counts by part ID at their current level. MAX calculates variances using this frozen image file as the inventory measurement against the actual physical count. So this is your initial file that will be used to count any kinds of variances and the like once your counts are done. Okay, so we'll go ahead and create those. We'll count the empty stock IDs too. And we'll start our first tag number at 1. And we'll do a few additional blank tags that we may need. Okay, then we'll create the file. Okay, now if we want to take a look at the exception report, we can do that. This shows us what happened when we actually ran the program. Got the part count, created the frozen file, allocated the numbers against the frozen inventory, and it successfully created the file. Okay, we'll close that. Okay, our next action is to print the tags. We'll go to Report, Print Tags. The Print Tags report prints numbered inventory tags. You may print tags with full detail or only with a sequential 8-digit tag number. After a sequentially numbered tag has been printed, only users with supervisory rights may reprint the tag before the Update and Purge file program runs. Now you have several options here to print your tags. You can do it by tag number, or you can do it by location and work center. You could select all of them, arrange, or even individual tags. You have the options to generate barcodes. We'll check that. We're not going to do any reprints right now, but we want to do multiple copies per page. Now you have several different tag report files that you can use. We'll take a look at some of those. We'll start with the first one. And by clicking the sample button, this allows you to preview the tag report. Here's our first one. Okay, let's look at our next one. Okay, this has several per page. And let's look at our third one. This one has 3. So our reports here, 1, 2, and 3, this will give you 1 tag per page. This will give you 2 tags per page. This will give you 3 tags per page. When we've made our selection, we can click Report. And this will report on all the tags that we have in here by tag number, including barcodes, and we're doing multiple copies per page. Alright, and there's our report. Okay, our next action is to perform tag maintenance. Now that you've printed out your tags, you'll start your counts. Once those tags come back, they can be entered in here with their appropriate counts. Now the tag maintenance dialog box is used to enter all the relevant data gathered during the physical inventory. MAX displays all detail information generated when the Create Tag program runs. If Generate Detail is not selected, additional details written on inventory tags must be entered manually using this tag maintenance dialog box. Any use of recount and void selections should be explained by your company's internal physical inventory policy. Okay, let's enter an account and look at some details here. So the yellow highlight is a browsable field. We'll double click and we'll select one of our tags. Okay, so our first one here is our computer max. We're not going to void it. We are going to enter in our quantity. We'll enter in the initials of the counter. And this is not under lot tracking, so we're getting no information here. But we could enter remarks here. Now once we've completed that, we'll click the Save button. Okay, so you would go through, receive your tags, look them up, and put in the count quantities and all the pertinent information and any needed. Now you have a number of inquiries and reports that you can run during the physical inventory process to audit what's been done or what hasn't been done. Under Inquiry, you can look up the count variance by part ID. We'll select that and enter in the part that we counted. As you can see here, our count quantity was 10,000 for the first tag, and we have a very large variance because when the frozen tag file ran, we only had 20 in stock. So you can use this to visually see through an inquiry what locations have variances and what the count quantity is and what the original count was at the time the frozen file was created. You can include uncounted locations as well in the inquiry. Okay, under Report, we have several reports here. We ran the Print Tags report. There's the Tag Audit report, the Uncounted Inventory report, Part Exceptions, Counted Tags, Detailed Part report, and Stock Audit Trail. Let's look at the Tag Audit report. The Tag Audit report is used to review the sequential numbering in detail from inventory tags. This report allows you to audit your tag numbers that have been entered from the physical inventory tags during an ongoing physical inventory, or to conduct a final audit for all numbered inventory tags. You may check the voided tag file for accuracy and completeness as to compliance with organizational policy. The uncounted tag file will show you possible misplaced or lost tags that may be critical to your inventory. Policy on lost tags varies by organization, though an audit trail should exist to show which uncounted tags are allowable. Let's run a report and review the output. Okay, well, I'm going to select all tags, not voided tags only, however I could do that, or uncounted tags. I want to see the cost. I want to use the standard cost, and I won't show blank tags for right now. Okay, so here's our result. As you can see, we have a sequential listing of all our tags, what type they are, the part ID, the stock location, the count quantity, the cost per unit. If it's under lot and serial control, we would see that information here. We have a couple like that. and we see the total cost over here on the side. As well, the report shows us whether it was counted or not. Okay, let's look at our next report. Uncounted inventory. Now this report displays a list of parts that have on-hand balances in MACs and were not counted during the physical inventory. It's listed by part identifier, by stock ID or work center, order number, or planner. Selecting to include the cost displays the dollar impact of any uncounted inventory against the actual physical inventory. This report may be used to search out uncounted inventory missed during the physical inventory process. The report displays all uncounted inventory not found in the physical inventory tag detail file that currently have on-hand balances in MACs. Okay, let's look at the part exception reports. Now the part exception report displays exceptions, which are dollar or quantity variances between the on-hand inventory balance and the actual physical inventory count for each part stock location input from the physical inventory tag. Both positive and negative variances display in descending order per selection criteria. Now you can select here either by cost or quantity for the exception type and specify an amount here. You can group the report by none at all, by planner ID, or by commodity code. Now the counted tag report, this allows you to see which tags have actually been counted, and if you want to, you can print the cost data along with it. You can do it by stock ID, work center, or commodity code. The detailed part report provides a detailed sequential list of parts sorted by part ID that includes all stocking locations and work centers. It shows parts with only on-hand balances from the tag work file and parts with physical counts from the tag details file. Count and cost variances may be included with totals for each part per work center and stockroom. You can specify a part ID range to limit the report size. Okay, our last report is the stock audit trail. Now this report displays posted inventory variances sorted by part identifier. So as you can see, you have a whole series of reports to review information and variances and so on from your physical inventory to identify what has not been counted and what has been counted, and so on. Okay, let's review our process thus far. So we created our tag files, we printed our tags, we did counts, and we released the inventory after the counts were done so the transactions could resume. That's with the exception of the cycle count. Those are not allowed. And then we entered in all our tag information. We've gone through and done some verifications using the reporting that's available in the physical inventory module. Now we're ready to update the inventory data files using the batch process, update and purge files. Okay, so we'll go to the batch menu. Now I'd like to show you one other thing before we actually go through and do the update and purge, and that's the update frozen tag data batch process. Now if changes are made to costs or quantities after the create tag program runs, you can update the part costs and on-hand quantities in the frozen tag work file before printing the physical inventory tags. This option helps ensure that the tag work file used to print inventory tag detail for your physical inventory is correct before printing tags. I just wanted to make sure that you knew this facility was here, so that if you have gone through and you've created the frozen file, some change has been made and you need to actually update it, then you can go in here and do that. You can do it by cost or cost and on-hand quantities, either or. So if you run the update on that, it'll update the files for you, and then you can go ahead and print your tags. So we'll close that. Okay, so back to the original process, and that was to update and purge files. All right. So once all the other prior processes, counts, reports, everything are done, you're going to need to go through and update your inventory balances. Now, this program updates max part stock files with physical inventory count information by processing adjustment transactions for each part stock location. The adjustment amount equals the variance between the on-hand inventory balance and the amount of the stock physically counted. Now, after updating inventory files, MAX reflects the new inventory levels affecting both inventory and overhead costs and the inventory quantity for MRP planning purposes. The transaction history file will contain an electronic record of each part stock update as an adjustment to stock transaction. The physical inventory module does not update the work. Okay, one other special note here, the physical inventory process really isn't complete until your work in process files have been manually updated. These files should be adjusted before manufacturing processes resume in order to provide accurate inventory balances and show an audit trail. The counted tag report can be used as a reference when adjusting work in process work center files. Okay, let's look at the options for the updates. So you want to update the on-hand values, obviously. And if you're going to need to create part stock records because new ones were created or parts were found in locations where they weren't before, you can select to create part stock records. Now, if you want to purge your tag files after this is done, you can do that. If you want to keep them, you can do that too. Okay, once you've done that, you click the Process button. Now, if you want to view the report output from that, you can click this button here. You could also specify another location for the exception report if you want to. With all that being done, you've concluded your physical inventory. Okay, well that wraps up our training session on inventory control and physical inventory in MAX. Now let's take a look at what you've learned today. So the first thing is you learned how to set up preferences in inventory control. You learned how to set up the inventory control module, and meaning by that you learned how to add part-specific information in inventory part data. You also learned how to set up your cycle count policy, set up your reorder point and reorder quantities, amongst some other things. As well, you learned how to do the various transactions. Okay, those were cycle counts, adjustments, receipts, issues, and also learned how to handle shop orders, purchase orders, and non-inventory POs. You learned how to use the reports and the displays to review information and report on information in the system. And finally, you learned how to do a physical inventory using the MAX software. All right, well, thank you for attending. I hope to see you for our next training session. Thanks very much. Please remember that you have additional resources to help you learn MAX. One is the documentation, the PDF files that are available through the System Manager, the document links that lie underneath the title of each module in the System Manager. Next, you have a full library of documents under the RM Server folder out in your MAX server. Those are all the PDFs, the entire library. Next, you have the Customer Portal. That's located at https://customers.exact.com. Now, if you don't have your username and password to the portal, then you should contact your customer advocate and they'll be able to give you a username and password to access that. There's a knowledge base there, plus a whole lot of other information to assist you with your implementation. Other resources are professional services and customer advocate and our support. Hope to see you for our next session. Thanks for attending.